Podcasting, the final frontier. This is the Hammer Podcast. Its 30-minute mission: to rehash geeky topics, to seek out new bastions of nerdiness, to timidly go where the more talented have gone before. Greetings, and welcome to the Hammer Podcast, the official podcast of thehammerstrikes.com. I'm your host, Gene Hendricks, and before we get to today's topic, we have some listener feedback and some business to discuss. So why don't we just get right into it with some listener feedback. We got 2 emails today. The first one comes from Chris Franklin, and it's just titled, Fall Guy. And he writes, Hi, Gene. Well, that was a fun blast from the past. I watch the Fall Guy regularly on its first run, but I really haven't given it much thought in years, mostly due to its absence in reruns. I had the die-cast miniature of the pickup truck. I think it was made by Ertl? Either way, I still have it, somewhere around here. And like you and Andy, I still remember the theme song lyrics. I seem to recall Majors performing, in quotes, lip-syncing, the theme on Solid Gold back around the time the show hit as well. It's a shame Majors, a fellow native Kentuckian, seems to have more or less retired. The last thing I remember seeing him in was the first live-action Ben 10 movie on Cartoon Network, where he played Grandpa Max, if that doesn't make you feel old. Anyway, great show. Always a pleasure to hear more from you and Andy, Chris. Well, thank you very much, Chris. Yeah, that was a fun episode to record. Andy and I originally proposed the idea to him back in January of 2015, and just various things got in the way, and scheduling, and etc., and, the 5-hour time difference, and it just took until the end of 2015 in order for us to record it, and it took me a few more months to get it out into the ethers where everyone could enjoy it, but I had a good time, and I definitely have to finagle Andy on again if I can, get him away from being the semi-regular permanent co-host over on Views from the Long Box. Anyway, our second email comes from my good friend and fraternity brother, Mr. Kurt Over, and its subject is Hammer Podcast Episode 18. Ah, Excalibur. Still the gold standard of King Arthur movies after 30-plus years. The 1950s movies have their moments, but don't match up to how Boorman chooses to portray the combat, betrayal, and length of the story. The more recent forays, First Knight and King Arthur, with Clive Owen, etc., won't be mentioned beyond this sentence since they fall far short in one or more cinematic or story areas, in addition to being horribly ludicrous at points as well. The overall material of The Matter of Britain is so broad and varied that one would think it could be mined more often. The Robin Hood folklore is of a comparable age and not as varied, but seems to be a more popular target. Perhaps the Errol Flynn film has something to do with it, but there appears to be an Arthurian film in the works for early 2017 release. But given the details listed in the Wikipedia entry for it, I have few expectations for it. But in any case, due to Excalibur, we also have the Williamson standard set for portraying Merlin, at least as an adult. Plus, Nigel Terry showing great range from clueless teen to ill and prematurely aged man as Arthur himself. And a great group of character actors who are interesting to spot in other films. Looking forward to the next episode, Kurt. P.S. Still brings tears to my eyes when I see the scene of the reinvigorated Arthur and his knights riding through the blooming orchard while O Fortuna plays. Part of what cinema is all about. Well, I couldn't agree more, and I know Luke Giaconetti agrees with you as well, Kurt. And if you want more information on my thoughts on the Errol Flynn Robin Hood, you can head on over to thehammerstrikes.com where I wrote an article about it, or go to the Film and Water Podcasts at fireandwaterpodcast.com and find the episode I did with Rob Kelly on that movie, which was also fun to record. Okay, listener feedback is now out of the way. Now we must discuss business. And that would be in regard to this particular episode, or I should say, episodes. You see, as part of the generational stories idea that I have going all over this year's episodes, I had the thought, if the thing has generations in the title, maybe I should cover it. Well, if I'm going to cover Superman, Batman Generations, I gotta have on Michael Bailey. One, he's a Superman and a Batman guy. And two, he's someone that I've always wanted to podcast with. Now, yes, I know, dear listener, I have on Comics Monthly Monday, but hear me out. Like with Andy and with Luke, Mike is a podcaster I've not actually been on a show with one-on-one, and it's something I wanted to do. And the fact that we're so close in age, so close from our points of origin, he from Eastern PA, me from South Jersey, I wanted to get his take on some things. Now, when you get somebody like Mike and somebody like me together to talk about a 4-issue series, that tends to run into the hours of recording time. Now, I am not going to subject you to that this time. What I'm going to do is, like I said, is 4 issues. This episode, we will tackle the first 2. Now, we didn't plan this when we were recording, so I'm going to fade out at the end, give you a little outro tag, and then we'll pick it up at issue number 3 next episode, which, because I planned this for the March episode, you will get in a few weeks. Yes, that is right, dear listener. You will get not 1, but 2 episodes of the Hammer Podcast this month. Now, should you want to keep this going, I must point out that I do have a Patreon page at patreon.com/thehammerstrikes. And one of the rewards, should I get to a certain level, is you will get 2 podcast episodes per month. So, if you like what I do here, and you want to hear more of it, and you like what I do on the blog, and apparently people do because I keep getting good reviews on that, please head on over to patreon.com and maybe throw in $1 or 2. You know, I would greatly appreciate it. It would help me to expand what I want to do. But that's enough of me begging you for money. We will now take a quick promotional break and be right back with the first part of this very special 2-part episode.
Superman.
Captain Marvel.
Batman.
It is 1985.
Robin of Earth 2.
Sergeant Rock.
The Legion of Superheroes.
This is the most eagerly awaited comic book event in 50 years.
Tommy Tomorrow.
Jonah Hex.
Commandy.
It will one day be called the greatest comic book event of all time.
Swamp Thing.
Wonder Woman.
The New Teen Titans.
The Haunted Tank.
Infinity Incorporated.
Worlds will live.
Green Arrow.
Worlds will die.
Supergirl.
The Flash.
And that is only the beginning.
The Justice League of America.
The All-Star Squadron.
The Huntress.
Ariana.
The Metal Man.
Firestorm. The Nuclear Man.
Outsiders.
Green Lantern.
The Blue Beetle.
The Crime Syndicate.
Warlord.
The Guardians of the Universe.
Tales of the Justice Society of America proudly presents,
And many, many more.
Crisis on Infinite Earth. The DC Universe will never be the same.
Coming January only at twotruefreaks.com.
Welcome back. And as I'm continuing my exploration of generational stories in media, we'll say, we're going to go to one that actually has the name Generations in the title, and that would be Batman, or Superman and Batman Generations. The movie has got me confused. It should always be Superman and Batman, but the movie is Batman v Superman. This is a John Byrne series done in 1999, 4 issues, just amazing stuff. And now, if I'm going to be talking Superman and Batman, then I'm going to have someone on because I'll just babble completely irrationally. So, who better than someone who is known as a fan of both these characters, and a man, as we record this, who is about to celebrate his 10th birthday, Mr. Michael Bailey. How are you, sir?
I'm doing okay. Yeah, you only turn 10 twice.
Well, you're not going to be 10 years old. You're just celebrating your 10th birthday.
Yeah, it's funny, though, because I was talking with somebody about this. Because when you're a leap year baby, one, you have to actually explain what a leap year is. And it's not actually, it's a leap year, but more specifically, it's a leap day. And there's something very specific with that. Because in a normal cycle, in 2005, February 5th was on a Wednesday, so in 2006 it's going to be on a Thursday. But because of the 29th, it leaps a day, which is where that term comes from. But when you are a leap baby, it's really weird. People don't know what questions to ask. It's like, so do you celebrate your birthday? It's like, well, obviously I age because I'm physically, I don't know if I'd be physically 40 at this point, but there could be parts of me that are physically like 80, so I'm not really sure. But no, the funny thing is that when I really got into Superman, I found out that it was his birthday too, so I figured it was fate. It was just total fate. But I'm not going to hit 40 twice.
No.
I do, well, if I do, then maybe I found a Lazarus pit somewhere.
Or you're the Ultra Humanite.
Or the nice.
Well, I gotta work the story in somehow.
But thank you for having me on. I love this series. I've loved this series since it first came out, and it continues to be one of my favorite things that John Byrne ever did.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll get into the specifics later, but this is one of those where I was in college at the time, and I went to a regular comic book store, which was actually fairly close to the campus. So it was just a couple blocks walk away from where classes were and everything. And when I was living in my fraternity house, it was actually even closer. And I was in there the one day, flipping through, I saw this on the shelf. Superman and Batman, Generations, An Imaginary Tale, 1939-1949. I'm like, what? By John Byrne? Gimme! Because, as most people know, John Byrne, that era was my introduction to the DC Universe. I got into Superman after Byrne was off the book, but I immediately went back and found more stuff, because my first Superman comic was the 1989 Action Comics Annual, Gladiator Superman on the cover.
Yes. Art of Exile, one of my favorite stories ever.
So Byrne was gone by then, because this was the whole aftermath of his last storyline. And this was so great. I mean, look at all this. Superman's Clark Kent's being impersonated by something on Earth. What's going on here? And the whole history of Krypton. So I went back and found Man of Steel, read that, and found as many issues as I could working through there. And I've always loved Byrne's art on X-Men, on Fantastic Four, on whatever he was working on. And now on his Star Trek stuff. I mean, one of the more recent series that I have is his miniseries of Leonard McCoy, Frontier Doctor, which is really, really good. It explains a lot.
That sounds interesting, at least.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm kind of fascinated by that.
It's between the end of the original series and Star Trek The Motion Picture.
Oh, so this explains how he got a beard and a medallion.
Exactly. And
very cool.
He's basically in a shuttlecraft going between planets and treating people or aliens or whoever as they need it, and he's running into, Scotty's on this planet doing something, and they have a little adventure in this issue. It's only 4 issues, but it's really worth it if you can find it. I think they have it traded now, but I'm not sure.
I might pick that up, because I must admit I haven't really read a lot of recent Byrne stuff, though everyone tells me that his Star Trek stuff is a lot of fun. But Byrne, I hold him... No, that's not right either. Everything you ever hear me do podcasting-wise, or anything I do with comics, Byrne is indirectly responsible for, because it was Superman number 8 and Action Comics number 591 that got me to start buying the Superman books on a regular basis. So, like you, when this came out, man, I was all about it. And it was in my early days online. I had just gotten AOL, because you either did that or like CompuServe or whatever in the 90s. And I went to the DC site regularly, and they had black and white previews of the first few pages of this first issue.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like, I'm there. It's Byrne, it's Superman, it's Batman, I'm there. So, yeah, it was like, this and all 3 of the Generations series I bought as they came out. So it's God, I love this.
Well, I think that's a preamble. Let's actually get into it. Now, I'm going to give the creator credits once, because it's the same for all 4 issues. John Byrne is writer, artist, and letterer. Trish Mulvihill. Mulvihill?
That's how I would pronounce it.
Mulvihill. I'm sorry, Trish, for butchering your name. I know you listen to this show regularly. Is the colorist. Heroic Age did color separations. Jameson, the interior separations. Superman created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. Batman created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger. So the way these issues are set up is it's a 4-issue series. Each issue covers 2 years, and all the years are separated by 10. So you have 1939 and 1949 in the first issue. And the way Byrne did it, and I love this, is he took, as much as possible, the heroes as they appeared in that era, both their look and their personality and the kind of stories they were involved in, and recreated that. So the Batman in 1939 has the fold-out bat wings and the big circle for his belt buckle. And Superman has the more, he has the triangular shield, although he doesn't have the lace-up boots, which I was a little disappointed in.
Yeah, that was a little, it would have been neat to see him do that trick, but right around this time, the Superman books did a storyline where all 4 of the books went to a different era.
Oh, yeah.
And Bogdanov and Simonson did the Golden Age, and they drew the kind of Action Comics #1 Superman, which was kind of interesting to see. I doubt that had any influence or, impact on why he chose to draw him the way he did in this story. But yeah, that would have been cool to see.
Yeah. Something else that we discover in this one is the World's Fair was not in New York in 1939.
Oh no! I mean, if it's gonna be in the DC universe, it's gonna be Metropolis.
Right.
I mean, seriously.
And so that means that the All-Star Squadron in this universe did not actually meet at the World's Fair for their regular meetings, because the Unisphere and Trilon are pretty much destroyed in this first story.
Well, not to jump to the second series, but they actually deal with the JSA, and I just got the idea that the All-Star Squadron didn't exist in this reality, that it was just the Justice Society.
That's the way it seems, yeah. Now, just as a quick overview of the first year, 1939, it's subtitled The Vigilantes, because both Batman and Superman are vigilantes in this. In fact, Superman is back to how he was in 1939. He's willing to let people die if he needs to be. Well, we have Bruce Wayne and his fiancée, Julie, flying in the autogyro, landing in the middle of everything, as a giant robot busts out of a building controlled by the Ultra-Humanite. And Julie is saved by Superman, lifting the robot up and then crunching it into a ball and throwing it in the river. Later on, Superman and Batman Superman leaps away. Batman goes to investigate the building the same time as Clark Kent and Lois Lane do. Batman grabs some evidence from Lois, and Clark tries to interfere. Batman hits him, realizing that this man is possibly a robot, because it was like hitting a steel girder, but Clark fakes being hurt anyway.
You do not want to pick a fight with this man.
No. Then you have the Ultra-Humanite and his 3 henchmen, including L, the letter L, a red-haired man. Basically, the Ultra-Humanite saying, "What the hell did he find? You were supposed to sweep the place." Then Bruce and Julie are in apparently a 3-star dump, although it looks like a 5-star hotel to me. They have a lavish breakfast while Lois consists on a bagel, a cup of coffee, and a cigarette. This will play in later. Everyone goes back to the fair the next day. They run across the Flying Graysons poster, and something straight out of Mask of the Phantasm. Bruce goes to look at cars at the World's Fair. Julie finally gets bored and goes away so that Bruce can go and do some more research. Here he is surprised to find Lois Lane is investigating as well, who can really, quote, what was the name of the show she was in? Leah Thompson.
The show?
Yeah, she was on a TV show where she was a cartoonist.
W-
Damn.
yeah, I watched reruns of
Yeah,
that.
but
Her friend was really freaking hot.
Well, she at one point in the show, she's listing all the different skills she has, and one of them is she can kick really high. Well, so can Lois Lane. I mean, she kicks one of the henchmen from, just standing, kicks him square in the jaw.
Yeah.
With her legs straight out. That's awesome. But she's overpowered. Bruce tackles one of the guys trying to hopefully not be seen, but gets tased. Lois gets knocked out, and they're both saved by Dick Grayson, who is, like 7 at this point?
Mm-hmm.
I think they don't actually mention when he's born, I don't think. Or they do in a later issue because, we'll get to it. So Batman goes back that night, and the crooks had left a truck. One of them goes back to get it, and is met with a fist right in the face. He's brought to the top of the Unisphere, or they're calling it something different. I don't remember what it is, though. And Batman wants information. Crook won't give it to him, so Batman lets him go. And he falls. Superman grabs him, brings him back up, and they have this lovely little exchange. Superman says, Batman said, if I'd known you were there to catch him, I wouldn't have let him fall. To which Superman replies, if I'd known you let him fall, I wouldn't have caught him. Which sums up both of them very well in 1939.
Yep, absolutely.
So they eventually find out that the Ultra-Humanite is hidden in... His hideout is in Prosperity Plaza. But there is no Prosperity Plaza on the Metropolis or the World's Fair map, but Superman has an idea. It's in the miniature City of Tomorrow. And there's a hidden hatch. They go down. Both heroes surprise the Ultra-Humanite, who rockets off in the Pyramax, which is the Trilon. And Superman tosses the Unisphere at him, which was a bomb, and it explodes, and all that comes down is a burnt-up red wig, which Superman just puts 2 and 2 together and figures out that this is somebody that he used to know. And the two heroes and Lois walk off into, well, it wouldn't be the sunset, it's kind of just a white panel. So that's the introduction, and I have to say, when I first read that, wow.
Yeah, this is, I love this era of both characters. The Golden Age is such kind of a, wild territory. It's just like the wild west almost of both characters, because both Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster and either Gardner Fox and Bill Finger and Bob Kane were kind of stretching their legs trying to figure out who these characters were and how they were going to act. One of my favorite bits of information I've learned over the years is that Superman was actually made to be more of a Law and Order type character based on Batman.
Yes.
Which just makes me laugh when you consider how the worm has turned in regards to both characters. But anytime you can set a story, a Superman story in the Golden Age, I love the look, I love the feel, I love the Clark in a 3-piece suit and a fedora, and Lois, in her outfits, and Batman in that, straight cape, as I'll call it, outfit, and just everything about it. When Byrne does backgrounds very well, and he does a great job of capturing the feel of 1939 America.
Yes.
And both characters act accordingly. I have such an affection for the rough and tumble Superman. The guy that's just starting out, he's not moving planets yet. He's not, counting the grains of sand on Mars. He's just, a guy who's stronger and faster and, less killable than everybody else. And he's just, knocking heads across Metropolis. And I like that because I think that's always how Superman should start his career. That even when he's at full power, he starts small as he starts to figure out what he can actually do, and then he goes from thinking locally to thinking globally. This is the thinking locally Superman. And that one line where he's like, well, if I knew you had dropped him, I wouldn't have caught him. that's this Superman. We're talking about a character that in his second appearance threw like 7 guys to their death.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, with guns wrapped around their necks. So this is a guy who's pretty determined to, mete out justice however he can, and so is Batman. And all the little touches, like Bruce Wayne landing and then trying to buy off the cops, and the cops are like, I don't know what it's like in Gotham, but you can't buy your way out of trouble here. And even, like, the Fleischer influences, like when Superman really first appears, he's fighting a robot.
Right.
Because there is nothing more awesome than Superman fighting a robot.
And the fact that Superman is squinting through this whole one. Yeah, he opens his eyes later on, but this is very on model for how Superman was back then.
And when some guy yells at him for destroying it, he intimidates him.
Yeah.
He just stares him down. It's beautiful. And Byrne manages to capture that first Bob Kane Batman in so many of the shots. Just like artistically, it is a sight to behold. And I like when Clark sees him. One, he is not Batman, he is Bat-Man.
Yes.
And even the word balloon changes when he says the name. And Batman is doing his best Michael Keaton. The one part of this story, of this chapter that makes me sad is Lois smoking.
Yeah.
And saying, don't forget the cigarettes packed with nutritional value. It's a bit of foreshadowing that you didn't see at the time, but just realizing what happens later in the story, it's just tinged with sadness now.
Yeah, but it excuse me, but it is also very true to the time period, because you have doctors saying, no, this cigarette is better for you than that other cigarette. You had Jack Benny. I have no idea what's wrong with my throat this morning. You have Jack Benny's program being sponsored by Lucky Strike.
Well, I mean, flash forward to like the 60s where Barney Rubble and Fred Flintstone were enjoying, I believe it was Winston's.
Yeah.
Like animated characters smoking. So yeah, there was a point where everyone thought it was okay and not bad for you. And then right around 1964, they started realizing, hey, maybe that's not quite the case.
Right.
So, but it's just, I love Lois. Lois got spunk. To quote Lou Grant. The only thing that kind of it's not that I dislike it. It's just the only thing about it that I don't love, I guess I should say, is I didn't like seeing Dick Grayson.
It did feel kind of forced. Yeah,
like he had to put him there, and to be fair, he works him into the story. It's not like it's not like, hey, hey, look, there's that boy, Dick Grayson. I'm gonna keep my eye on him.
Mm-hmm.
But Dick actually does something, and to be fair, we see things for the Flying Graysons earlier in the chapter, so it's set up that they're at least there.
Right.
But yeah, it's just like, did I really need to see them working together now? This is when he's solo. That's the whole point.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a great intro to the whole story, and I know I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit here, but I like this whole series because I think this cemented in my mind my preferred way, which will never happen, but my preferred way to handle superheroes, and that is in a legacy fashion. The original hero ages out of the part, the next, either the sidekick or somebody else comes in to fill the void, and you go like that. You get to, Batman 25 or whatever. It's never going to happen because you're never going to have Bruce Wayne not be Batman in mainstream DC continuity, except for a brief story arc. But reading this, it's like, God, I wish all comics were like that.
Well, that was Byrne's entire point of doing the series, was what if these characters started in 1939 and went forward, and he did two things. One, he specifically put in inconsistencies in the history.
Yeah. Because
there were inconsistencies as the characters developed. So any quote-unquote mistake with continuity within the story is completely on purpose. But also it was to see, who would be the next generation of Superman, who would be the next generation of Batman, and to kind of mimic, like you said, those time periods where if it's taking place in 1939, they're going to look and feel like they were in 1939. So and right down to having Ultra Humanite be the bad guy, because that was Superman's first real kind of supervillain, really, was the Ultra Humanite, was this bald guy that started off with a taxi cab scheme. Still trying to figure that story is so weird because it starts off as this really standard like original Superman story where he's like taking down like a crooked taxi cab company, and then it turns into a supervillain and like science fiction. So it's like really the point where Superman started to change. And I just love that we see L and we see a red wig, but at the same time, Ultra Humanite's the bad guy in this story. And he's an old man in what I will term 90s Byrne outfit. Because this outfit is something Byrne this isn't 80s Byrne, this isn't 70s Byrne, this is 90s Byrne. Which is odd because it's set in 1939. But, you know, everything else is just so on point. You know, Batman doesn't have a yellow oval around his bat, and he won't until the late 60s. Superman has a triangular S and a shorter cape. I mean, just like everything about it is just so on point. And I love starting with this one because it just gets you into the mood for the entire series. But at the same time, you want to see more adventures of these two characters, not necessarily together, but I want to see this Superman going on his adventures. And I want to see this Batman, you know, fighting Dr. Death in Gotham City.
Yeah, it's really well done, and one thing I have to say, a lot of people, and sometimes rightly so, complain that John Byrne has characters that they all look alike. Everyone's faces, all the women look the same, all the men look the same. Not so much in this series. If you look, the one panel on page 11 of the Ultra Humanite and his three henchmen, they all look different. All of them. You know, the same thing with the police officers that Bruce Wayne runs into. Different faces. So it may be that on his monthly work, he was going to, I need male model 1 or female model 2 or whatever. But here he makes the effort and gives each face its own character. And you can always tell going forward as they age, it's still the same face, it's just a different age. Which is not easy to do. You know, you can draw old man face and young man face, but to make them the same person that you can instantly tell they're the same person is not an easy trick. Most artists can't really do it. So is there anything else on 39, or should we move on to 49?
Let's move on to a slightly goofier age.
Yeah, slightly goofier? Okay. All right, 1949, subtitled Family Matters. We open with the Joker holding a pregnant Lois Lane captive in a laboratory. And as she is, telling him, my husband will have contacted Superman by now, the Joker, brushes that aside and says, listen, I know that you're married to Superman. Knock it off. At which point, Superman busts through the window, as Superman does. And the Joker exposes him to green kryptonite, which Superman collapses to the floor and then suddenly grabs the Joker's wrists and plucks the kryptonite out of his hand. Shocked, the Joker doesn't know what to do, and then Superman is shot in the back by Lex Luthor, who comes out from a hidden hiding place. The Luthor explains that this wasn't, anything special. It was just a regular bullet, and that's because he pulls off the rubber mask over the Batman cowl, including the ears.
Love it.
And then we flash back in time, because that's how these stories worked. Back to the Batcave, which I will pause in the synopsis here and just say, this is Byrne tech at its best. The Batcave is multi-story, computers everywhere, and these are 1949 computers, remember. The entire computing power of the Batcave is less than your iPhone. But Batman is talking to Alfred, and they're going over the fact that, Dick's about to leave for college. If he wants to say goodbye, he knows where to find me, and the whole way that they've handled Batman with Dick going off to college before. And Dick shows up in a very interesting Robin outfit, which looks a lot like the Tim Drake version mixed with the Earth 2 Robin.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. It looks great.
It looks fantastic. I love it.
So Batman and Robin go to visit Commissioner Gordon. But this is not Jim Gordon, who is, at this point, I believe he was missing, presumed dead. And this is my Generations 2 knowledge coming in. And it's Tony Gordon, Commissioner Gordon's son. Says that a man with green hair was sighted at the Gotham Metallurgical Institute. They don't know what the Joker wants there, so they go to investigate, and looking over the clipboard of what was stolen, the Batman realizes Superman is in danger. So they take the Batplane, and this is Batplane 2, because I remember that story from the greatest Batman stories ever told. And they fly to Metropolis. Superman meets them, and they fill him in that, oh, well, guess what? The metal stolen from Gotham was kryptonite. So we cut back to where the story began, and we have Superman and Robin. Superman using his X-ray vision, super hearing, and super ventriloquism to fill Robin in on exactly what's happening inside. And Robin's kind of creeped out by the way Superman is doing Luthor's voice. Which goes back to the Superman the Animated Series episode where Superman did Robin's voice and creeped him out.
Yes. Gotham Knights.
I love that episode.
It's Batman going to town on Bane. I mean, Superman going to town on Bane. How can you not like that?
So, Robin comes up with an alternate plan to Superman just busting in there. And while they're working this out, they give the backstory about how the Joker was captured by the Russians after World War II, and it was in a Soviet gulag. Luthor found out where he was and busted him out in some really interesting high-tech way and proposed, well, I helped you out, you do this for me, because, I mean, the Joker is an honorable man and pays his debts. So, after that story wraps up, Superman flies in, and at this point, Lois blows the secret completely wide open, says, Clark, no. After all this, no, they're two different people. Why you would admit to Lex Luthor and the Joker that, yes, he is Clark Kent, I have no idea. But anyway, the Joker whisks Lois behind a lead sheet. Superman stands there while Luthor explains that he has something a present for Superman. And as he goes to open a container, two beams of heat vision melt it. Luthor calls Superman a liar for claiming that he wouldn't stop him. But then this Superman says, and I didn't Luthor, and off panel we have, but I did, and there's another Superman. Because this Superman was Robin. So the Joker puts a gun to Lois's head, and at that point, Batman gets up because he wasn't really hurt, knocks the Joker out. Luthor opens the green K container, puts it on the Joker, and pulls the Joker off to a rocket ship. And since this worked so well 10 years ago. Batman throws a batarang, it lodges in the rocket's launch rail, and they manage to capture, they manage to escape just before the rocket blows up. Presumably, killing the Joker and Luthor. But we know that's not ever going to happen. So they go through and explain, well, why didn't Superman just bust in? Because Luthor had a catacomb of tunnels, all lead lined, so they didn't know exactly where he was. The reason Batman's not dead is Superman used his split-second timing of super breath and heat vision to melt the bullet and knock over Batman dressed as Superman. However, it turns out that Lois was exposed to gold kryptonite, which, as everyone knows, completely alters the molecular structure of Kryptonian, making them powerless forever. Which means that the little baby, Joel, inside her, will never have powers. So they decide the only way to keep Joel from going completely batty, if you'll excuse the phrase, is to never tell him that he is the son of Superman. So Batman and Robin head back. They switch the Batplane into Batcopter mode to land in the Batcave. While we go to 1 year later, Alfred is tending the bees at Wayne Manor, and Bruce Wayne's new bride comes out with her face covered in a beekeeper's mask and says she has something important to tell Bruce, and behind her we see a ball of yarn and a knitted baby booty. Now, this is something that I don't think Byrne has ever said who Bruce Wayne's wife is, correct?
Nope, never revealed it, and he shouldn't. He really shouldn't.
No, he shouldn't. Now,
there's no point in it.
Now, we happen to know from Generations 2 that it is not Catwoman.
Yes.
Because Catwoman is mentioned somewhere else. So it could be Julie, his fiancée from 1939. Could be another woman. We don't know.
Could be Vicky Vale.
Could be Vicky Vale. Could be, what's her name?
Silver St. Cloud.
Silver St. Cloud. I was going to say Summer St. Cloud. That wasn't right. I'm mixing up Silver St. Cloud and Summer Gleason.
Could be Vesper Fairchild.
Yeah.
If you really want to get like 90s Batman all up in that joint. So
anyone that Bruce Wayne never had a relationship could be his wife. And this strikes me more as a early 50s story than a late 40s, but I'm not well versed in that era of either Batman or Superman, but it is definitely more on the sci-fi side of things.
Yeah, I mean, you have all the Luthor tech. You have, him basically spending millions of dollars in equipment to pull off rather tame schemes. It's like Marv Wolfman always said. He'd use $1 million robot to steal $500,000 from a bank. I think the real charm of this chapter is all the little tropes of Batman disguised as Superman, and then Robin disguised as Superman, which they did frequently in the World's Finest Stories to avoid kryptonite. Him taking off the mask and the cowl being under there makes me smile so hard. It's one of those things that makes no sense, but who cares? Comics. And the other thing that I love is that apparently these temporary Superman costumes are composed of the thinnest of materials.
Yeah, because Robin just rips it right off.
And they just don't care. I guess it didn't really cost all that much to make, so Batman tears his off too.
Yeah, well, originally in what was it? It was like supposedly their first team up. Didn't they use the colored parachutes from the Batplane to make up a Superman outfit?
That sounds familiar.
I think it was in either Greatest Batman or Greatest Superman stories. I don't remember. I remember reading it, but this is like they're made out of tissue paper.
But Batman has the shorter ears. He has a smile on his face through most of the story. He's kind of big and broad, as he was in the late 40s and the 50s. Superman's a little thinner. His cape's shorter, which I appreciate that attention to detail. It's also kind of ironic because one of the things I loved about Byrne's Superman when I first started picking up the titles back in 1987 was that the cape was long and flowing, and here he's kind of doing the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
The Joker is a much thicker Joker, which is time period appropriate. Robin's costume is great. I love the long pants. I love the black gloves and the black boots. One of my favorite moments, though, in this story is the Joker in a Soviet gulag.
Yes.
Being put to hard labor. And I'm trying to remember if this was something that was keyed off of the Batman Captain America one-shot that Byrne did, because apparently that's in Generations continuity.
Is it?
Yes, that is an unofficial chapter of Generations.
Huh, I have to pick that up
retroactively, because he did that one first.
Right.
But still, there is something in there, and I don't know exactly where it is, and I think Andy Leyland can tell me where this is, but there's a point in the stories where you can see where it fits, and I've never read it in that order before, so, but I'm kind of wondering if what happened to the Joker in that story kind of led him to this, basically. So, but I just like the idea that, they've had their glory days of, World War II in the mid 40s, basically. And now everyone's just kind of moving on, and the Joker ended up in a Soviet gulag. I mean, it's so weird, but it's so fitting.
Yeah.
And I love the look of Luthor's device that rescues him. This giant tank that turns into a helicopter.
Yeah, it actually leaves half of itself behind. It leaves the wheels behind to take off. So you have to wonder, are the Soviets now going to reverse engineer that?
But Luthor is heavy set and
obviously rich. He's in a penthouse.
Yeah, more. I mean, this is kind of like Burns Luthor from his traditional run on Superman. So,
Right.
But no, just everything about this story is just fantastic. The split second timing of Superman using his super breath and heat vision to knock Batman over and vaporize the bullet. The different tech that Batman has where his plane turns into a helicopter as well, though how that thing's going to land where it is, because those propellers look like they're bigger.
The entrance is about a half the size of the propeller diameter, so it's going to go down, suddenly shut off, and drop the rest of the way.
Superman's more powerful because he's got X-ray vision and microscopic vision to the point where he can look at the atomic structure of the child.
Yes.
And on a story level, this is important because this is where the setup of the fall of Superman's son begins, because they make the decision to not tell him that his father is Superman. And I think it's one of those things where the story has to play out this way, but if you're thinking about it on a quote-unquote realistic level, which you really don't want to apply this story to because it's supposed to be fun, but really, why not tell him? Would it really... If you tell him and then make him feel bad because he doesn't have powers, that's one thing. But it's just like, when you were in utero, something happened, and I'm sorry, you just don't have your powers, but that doesn't mean that you can't be a hero. Look at your mother. She has no superpowers, but she went on to become one of the most fearless investigative reporters on the planet.
Look at your Uncle Bruce.
Yeah, look at your Uncle Bruce. I mean, you're not... Basically, what they're saying is that he's almost handicapped, which isn't the case at all. And it ends up coming to bite them in the ass rather biblically.
But that also did fit with this time period, because and just look at Agent Carter, the TV series for that. You have the one guy who was injured in World War II and now has a false leg, and everyone treats him like he's a useless cripple. Well, that's the mindset of back then. It's like, well, he's human. If his father's Superman, he'll never measure up. Therefore, we can't ever tell him for his own mental health. It's just the way they thought back then. If you had any deficiency, then you were worthless.
I'll agree with that.
I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that's how they thought.
So no, I didn't think you were making a judgment call on all of humanity right now.
I've been known to do that, but not right now.
But no, this is one of those things that he manages to capture the feel of that era, and it's really funny that the eras that I am not as interested in as others are the chapters that I read and go, oh, that was fun, but really kind of move on quickly because I want to get to the eras that I like. If that makes any sense. Yes,
it does, because you have this completist mentality. You must get through this because you can't just jump. You have to start here. That's why I'm about a third of the way through the Lantern cast right now, because I have to start at the beginning, and they have almost 300 episodes.
You gonna email them about something they talked about 5 years ago?
I've learned my lesson on that.
It's a gentle post.
All right, shall we jump to issue number 2?
Yes.
All right. If you thought the last one was strange, this is even stranger. In fact, it's right in the title. 1959, Strange Days. We open with Batman in his whirly bat, one of the best bat devices ever, chasing a warehouse with 6 legs. So, obviously, the only way to stop this warehouse is for Batman to rope it and ride it like a bronco. And it bucks just like a bronco. Eventually settling down, Batman swings down and calls to Batmite to show himself, but it isn't Batmite, it's Mixia Spitlick. So before we find out exactly what's going on over here, we switch to Metropolis, where we have what would you call him, about 1,000 feet tall?
Yeah, probably.
Superman with basically looks like the Frankenstein monster, picking up a freighter. Jimmy, with his Mentalo helmets, is telling Superman to put it down, and just so happens that is exactly 24 hours since Superman was exposed to red kryptonite, and he pops back to normal. We cut to the Kent household, where little Kara Kent is running in, trying to tell her mommy to look at something. Then Lois, finally done with the TV report on Superman, looks and says, "Oh, your feet look fine, sweetie. What's wrong?" And Kara says, "But Mommy, they're not touching the ground," which kind of frightens Lois. So we go back to Superman and a balding Jimmy Olsen, and suddenly Batmite shows up. Then we switch back to Batman and Mixie Spitlick. I'm just going to call him Mixie from here, just because I need to, save my voice. And I'm going to have people, regardless of how I pronounce it, it's not Mixelplickshag, I'm sorry, that I'm not going to be right. So, Commissioner Gordon is worried that Mixie is going to turn them all into kangaroos or something, which Mixie partially does it to Gordon and changes him back. And we switch over to Batmite, making the entire city of Metropolis march in a parade. And I don't mean the people, I mean the buildings. And he tells Superman what's going on. Apparently, he and Mixie were brought up to an alien spaceship. And within this flashback, we get another flashback of the aliens saying that they were a peaceful race, with no defenses whatsoever, and they were conquered by this other race, the Borton Empire. And they laid waste to the planet, but the aliens used stolen technology to find Earth, because that is the home of all superheroes, and they see the Justice Society. Now, this is the only appearance of the Justice Society in this series, but it is great because it is Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Jay Garrick Flash, the Alan Scott Superman, Hawkman, which is, I'm assuming, Carter Hall, and the Al Pratt Atom. So they build this ship over years from salvaged parts and head out to Earth. But because of a fight, they lose most of their fuel in avoiding laser blasts, and they realize they can only take one hero back with them. So they get to Earth, and, well, obviously the two greatest are Superman and Batman. They have to figure out which. So they brought in Mixie and Batmite, and they have to prove that their hero is the best. But in order to do it and be fair about it, they have switched heroes. So after explaining all this, Batmite brings I don't know what it is, it's a giant reptilian creature from a billboard to life, and rather than see the fight with that, we switch back to the Kent household, where Lois digs out a red sun pendant, which will nullify Kara's powers until they can figure out how to control them. We switch over to the Batcave, where Bruce Jr., with the unfortunate nickname of BJ, is practicing in the Robin suit, which Alfred tells him, you really shouldn't be doing that, your mom doesn't want you to. And they reminisce about how Dick is now a DA in New York City, and how he won't be Batman for a while because he's fighting crime another way. And at this point, Dick shows up. And they reminisce a little more, and we switch to Batman, back in the Whirly Bat, going after a giant robot which is destroying Gotham City. Batman goes down to a steam shovel and hits the robot. We don't see what happens because we switch back to Metropolis, where Superman is holding off the creature, but decides, if Mohammed can't come to the mountain, we'll take the mountain to Mohammed, and creates a giant tornado sucking up both Batmite and the creature, and goes to Gotham, where he dumps the creature on top of Mixie's robot. Batmite and Mixie have an argument about peanut butter and chocolate, and then they create a giant Cthulhu-like old god kind of creature which dwarfs Gotham City. Batman flies away because he doesn't want to deal with this. And then Batmite grabs the Whirly Bat, knocking Batman out. Superman saves him, but the creature smacks them both and then boom, crushes them, apparently. Mixie and Batman are Mixie and Batmite are arguing, it's your problem, you killed them, etc. The aliens show up and say, you defeated both Superman and Batman. You're the ones to save our planet. So they steal both of them, and they leave. The creatures all disappear, the destruction is still there, And you have the standard, oh, it's a good thing you dug so quickly out of the way before we got stomped, etc. And the last panel of this story is an old man, Lex Luthor, going to talk to Joel Kent and telling him that he has something important to tell him. Dun, dun, dun.
Usually old men approaching small boys is not good. I mean, I just picture Chris Hansen coming out and saying...
We're not talking about the origin of Captain Marvel here. Come, little boy, follow me into this subway tunnel where no one will see us.
You know, it's funny. I mentioned before that I have different eras of both characters that I prefer over others. I am not a big 50s Batman type guy. I don't hate that stuff. I'm not saying it shouldn't exist, because it happened, and there are people out there that love Silver Age Batman and the kind of out there ideas that happened. And similarly, part of me despises Batmite, but, you know, some of his stories are part of my earliest comic book reading experiences. Going back to Superman from the 30s to the 70s, which I checked out of and Batman from the 30s to the 70s, which I checked out of the library, you know, constantly. And similarly with Superman, you know, while there isn't an era of Superman that I hate, and there isn't even an era of Superman I don't like, outside of the current era, and that's not me, you know, being like an old fan grousing about it. I just think that, you know, when you look at the stories told in the last 5 to 15 years, they're not as good consistently as other eras. But this one hits all of the notes of both the Silver Age Batman and Superman. You have Batmite, and you have Superman exposed to green kryptonite and turned into a Frankenstein's monster, and Jimmy wearing this bizarre headpiece and all that, and aliens showing up, and, you know, them doing kind of a contest of champions type thing, where it's just like, okay, we got these aliens that want to figure out who the most powerful is, so Mxyzptlk and Batmite are going to fight that out with it. And then you have, going again back to some of my earliest comic book reading experiences, you have Bruce's son, who's blonde, which should be a hint, I feel. You know, wanting to be Robin, and, you know, Dick Grayson kind of coming back to town, and, you know, very soon he's going to be taking over for Bruce. It's a fun story, but this is my least favorite of a series that I love.
Yes, and that's, you know, it's like saying it's your least favorite type of pizza.
Yeah.
You know, it's a good story. I've never really enjoyed the Imp from Another Dimension kind of stories, except in the more modern, post-Crisis, the way Byrne handled Mixie, and how the rules always changed. How it was, well, yeah, you get me to say my name backwards here, but no, that's not the rule this time. This time it's this. You have to get me to do that, or whatever. And it was a little more toned down, but then you also have the animated series with Gilbert Gottfried as Mixie, and you don't get any better than that, really.
No, not really. Not at all.
But that's... I don't remember him on the Super Friends. I know I watched the Super Friends.
He was on it. He did a whole Wizard of Oz thing, and then he...
Oh, the Wizard of Oz. Oh, I forgot about that.
He was on the Superpowers version of the show, too, messing with Firestorm.
Okay, see, I didn't really watch much of the Superpowers line. I don't know why. I had all those figures. Well, not all of them. I had a good portion of them. But I think the last Super Friends cartoon I actively watched was Challenge of the Super Friends.
Yeah, Mixie was done by the same voice as the guy that did Toyman.
Ah, okay.
If I'm remembering, that's how I remember it, at least. I haven't watched those episodes because the Mixie episodes were never my favorite as a kid, so that's kind of carried on as an adulthood. And that's the thing is, like, you know, because of the post-Crisis version of the character, I have a lot of affection for Mr. Mxyzptlk. Not so much the Eurotrash version that they had in Smallville, but you know, I like him as a character and what he represented to Superman in the 40s. He was part of Jerry Siegel. You know, Jerry Siegel was a frustrated comedic writer. And Mxyzptlk, as he was originally called, was an attempt to have this really goofy element, this funny element, and Superman's the straight man. And that's why that episode of Superman the Animated Series is so brilliant, is they capture that perfectly.
Right.
It's just everything it needs to be. It's Superman sitting there. One of my favorite moments in that episode is him sitting in the Daily Planet office. It's like, what's going on? Expecting a friend. And all this weird stuff just starts to happen, and Superman's just got this look on his face. And it's just beautiful. But here we have this is the goofiest thing ever. However, even though it's not my cup of tea, I recognize that Byrne is tapping into that bizarre anything is possible feeling that the 40s and the late 40s and the 50s stories had.
Oh, yeah.
You know, anything was possible. And I love the fact that this is it's not an 8-pager, but it's almost an 8-pager, because that's how comic stories were structured back then. You got 3 to sometimes more stories an issue.
Well, if you take out the flashes to the other locations, then it is pretty much 8 pages.
Mm-hmm. And, I like that Byrne keeps reminding us that this, as much as we're reminiscing and playing on this, certain time periods, there is an overall story happening. And Kara finding out that she has powers, Lois continuing to smoke, Bruce's son, BJ, really?
That's why I said unfortunate nickname.
wanting to be Robin and training, even though his mother has basically, forbidden it. We have an older Alfred. We have Dick coming home, with from where he was. So, as Jeffrey and I sometimes joke on From Crisis to Crisis, all subplots are accounted for.
Yes.
And I like that, because that is what I am, in the end, that is what I'm invested in as a reader. As a fan, as somebody who likes to wax nostalgic on a regular basis, the different eras and their feeling and the way Byrne evokes their feelings is fun. But as a reader, I am interested in how these characters are developing. It's the beauty of Generations, is that while it is him telling stories from bygone eras, it is also him telling a story. And it's the story's called Generations. It's a generational story, and we're now just starting to see that element of it, where we're seeing the next generation coming up.
Yeah, and it's going to get interesting very shortly.
Mm-hmm.
And shall we head on?
Yes.
Okay, 1969, Changing Times. Boy, are they not kidding. All right, we start with a peace protest in front of the White House, where President Nixon is complaining to the Justice Society that they really should be either helping to get these protesters out of there or heading over to Vietnam and winning the war for him. When they refuse, he kicks them out. So we have Wonder Woman, The Flash, and Green Lantern all depart, and Superman and Batman, who has a yellow oval and is Dick Grayson, heading back to the Batcopter, or actually, to me, it looks like the flying Batcave. What do you think on that?
Yes, a little bit. I'll go with that.
So they're basically, Superman is worried because his son had enlisted in the army and is in Vietnam now, and Bruce Jr. is about to go into service because he refuses to let Bruce use his influence to get him out of the draft. So we cut to the grave of Alfred Thaddeus Crane Pennyworth, who died apparently 2 years prior. Bruce is sitting there wondering, what to do, and the ghost of Alfred shows up. Now, Bruce isn't sure whether this is an actual ghost or a mental instability in himself, but he's going to talk it over anyway. So they basically go on about how it's catching us up on what happened over the last 10 years, and then Bruce bids Alfred adieu because he has to get back to the Batcave and play Kevin Conroy, because Dick and Bruce Jr. are off visiting the Joker in prison, and they're asking him about Joker Jr., who has apparently he claims to be the Joker's son, but the Joker says, I don't have a son, I don't have a protege, so you're out of luck. They leave the prison in the Batboat and head back to Gotham City. And neither of them are convinced that the Joker has nothing to do with it, but they're going to follow whatever leads they can. So we cut to Metropolis, where Lois Lane is just getting the news that she has cancer and will die. And the doctor is, trying to make her see reason. Yes, we can treat you, and Lois is having none of it. Go back into the waiting room, where Kara is going to take her home. Kara has a very worried look on her face, because with super hearing, she can overhear everything. They go up to the roof, and her daughter changes into Supergirl, putting on a black wig, which is explained in Generations 2. It's actually bonded to her bio-aura, so it's not going to fall off. So, the Kent women fly home as we cut to Vietnam. There's a squad apparently over the border, and they are being led by Lieutenant Joel Kent, who is, the best way to put it is he's bloodthirsty. And he came across a village, and he's sure it's a Viet Cong camp. Well, they attack, they slaughter pretty much the whole village, and there are no combatants there. So all the men want to get back before they are found out to have slaughtered innocent civilians. But Kent is going to leave no witnesses and kill the rest of the people, and one of his men cocks a gun, and we will find out what happens later. So we go back to the Batcave, where Bruce, Dick, and Bruce Jr. are talking over what is going on with Joker Jr. And Bruce Jr. suggests using his emergency bat suit and his bat voice to have two Batmen searching. And that Dick's, no, that's not going to work because we have to only have one Batman. Or, I'm sorry, Bruce says that. Because apparently there's an illusion in the public's mind that there's only ever been one Batman. So they split up, Dick going to the Gotham Diamond Exchange building because that was one of the clues that Joker Jr. had left. And Robin is going back to the prison, where the warden is not too happy to have someone visiting after lights out. Well, they go into the cell and realize that it's a dummy in the bed, not the Joker. The warden backs up into the table and knocks something off. Robin realizes that the Gotham Diamond Exchange building had been renovated. The Joker has plans that show things that were never on the official documents. Also, he finds spirit gum and makeup. He realizes what's going on and quickly exits the prison. Batman, however, has entered the Diamond Exchange building and is caught in a trapdoor, which, obviously was right exactly where he was standing. And this is where it gets kind of disturbing, folks, so, you may want to take a seat. He falls into a shaft, but it's narrow enough that he can prop himself against the walls. Well, razor-sharp blades come out of the walls, and obviously he can't prop himself against those, and he falls down, and the blades are cutting into him, some all the way to the bone. He finally comes out at the end through a gigantic Joker face, and confronts Joker Jr., who looks very, very 60s. But it turns out that the blades were drugged with a psychotropic cocktail, and Batman is starting to see all kind of weird images, including the Joker having a huge head and then melting into two different parts. It's very Yellow Submarine here. So Joker Jr. tips him into a bunch of giant meringue pies. Batman sees the meringue attacking him, but what is happening in reality are machine guns are popping up. Outside, Robin arrives, and the police can't get into the building. They hear gunshots. So Robin drives his motorcycle straight through the glass doors, runs down to the sub-basement, and finds Batman dead. The police rush in after Robin, find Joker Jr., who rips off his wig and sideburns and claims, "No more Junior, if you don't mind. I wasn't lying when I told Batman I never had a son or trained protege." So the Joker is happy because his lifelong ambition of killing Batman has been fulfilled. And from off-panel we say, no, as usual, he's lying. He didn't kill Batman. He killed Robin. So Bruce Jr. has put on his emergency bat outfit, changed clothes with Dick, and covered Dick's face because the black hair would have been a dead giveaway. In epilogue, we have Bruce Jr. comforting Kara, and Bruce Sr. coming over saying, it's not going to be easy, but, we'll get along without Batman. Bruce Jr. says, no, you'll have to use your influence, get me out of the army. I am going to become Batman. because that's what Gotham needs. After the funeral, the Kents fly home, Superman carrying Lois and Supergirl flying next to them. They get back home and find a telegram informing them that Joel Perry Kent was reported killed in action. That's what I call a heavy issue.
Yeah, this, wow, he manages to capture what I will call modern interpretations of the past. Obviously the stories, the Superman and Batman stories of this era, while the Batman stories were becoming increasingly relevant, I guess is the best way to say that, they never really, or if they did, they hardly ever, especially Superman stories, hardly ever dealt with the Vietnam War or protesters or whatever, and if they did, it was usually poorly handled.
Right.
One of my favorite bits is that Nixon has a 5 o'clock shadow, and that's because Nixon had to shave like twice a day. Mm-hmm. Apparently his facial hair grew super fast. So, but I like the fact that Byrne is commenting that, yes, these heroes fought in World War II, but they're not going to fight in Vietnam because that's a different kind of battle. And I appreciated that. Now, this whole chapter, as sad and as dramatic as it is really well done. I mean, the whole thing with Alfred, with Bruce at Alfred's grave, the artistic touches of everyone's hair being just a little bit longer, 60s Joker. I mean, you just kind of expect him to go, yeah, baby. Whenever you see, the quote unquote younger Joker, but I really like it. I mean, there's a term in the military called fragging, and that is basically when one American soldier kills another American soldier. Usually it was lower ranking soldiers killing their commanding officer for various reasons. Some were racially motivated, but others were basically, this guy's going to get us killed, right, so we have to take him out. And it's really, like, Byrne is commenting on how comics grew increasingly darker over the decades by showing us a Joel Kent who is so hell-bent on proving himself. He's going over the line, abusing civilians, and finally one of his men, takes a gun out, and as we're leaving that scene, you get the sense they're going to shoot this guy. They're going to kill him before he gets them killed. And it's so sad, especially with the death of Dick Grayson, that both Clark and Bruce lose their first sons during the course of this chapter.
Right.
And it's, on a storytelling level, it's beautiful. And there's all kinds of fun stuff, not fun, but like little bits, like the fact that Bruce Wayne Jr. and Kara are involved. We see that at the end of the chapter. We see Alfred's ghost, who plays a larger part in the second generation story, where we get kind of the resolution of this story. I love how Byrne draws the late 60s, 70s Batman.
Oh, yes.
It's just gorgeous. The coloring is perfect. Everything about it just makes me happy.
Yeah, and I like how you have, I mean, everyone's got the, everyone's getting older has the Reed Richards effect. Obviously, they go gray from the bottom up, which I can tell you exactly from experience, it don't work that way.
That's working that way for me, actually.
I'm getting gray all over, especially the beard. But you have I would call it Chekhov's costume in the beginning here.
Chekhov's costume, that's brilliant.
Because, hey, I just happen to have this spare Batman costume that Barry Allen taught us how to shrink down into my belt buckle. That's getting used later.
And I love that his Batman voice is in a bat-shaped balloon.
Yes.
Which comes into play later in the story. So, it's all there. Byrne doesn't do anything in this chapter that isn't hinted at, and everything that happens in the story is layered like that.
Right. Yeah, and I really like his attention to detail in the backgrounds, because if you look in the Batcave scene, I'm on page 36, the computer screen in the back is the clue that Dick Grayson is then running down. It's pay a visit to a multifaceted old lady of a recent facelift. So it's, he could have had anything there. So, no, I'm going to put exactly what they're about to do on the next page. So it's great. And, it's the last page is just powerful with everything Bruce he's going to become Batman, and then realizing, oh, Joel Kent is dead, and that hits a bit close to home because that's just under a year after my uncle was reported dead.
Oh,
in Vietnam.
Sorry to hear that.
Oh, I wasn't alive.
Yeah.
I'm only 3 months older than you. I wasn't alive back then. But it's one of those things that's always in the back of my head. While I'm reading a Vietnam story, I know, when that happened, so I know exactly what happened to my grandparents when they got that news. I mean, my dad still says that's what killed his mother. I knew my grandmother, but he says she was never the same after they got that telegram.
Yeah, and that was, sadly, that was a common experience in the 60s. I mean, and the early 70s. It's one of those things where it's almost become cliched how people talk about the Vietnam War.
Mm.
And because it's comfortable from nearly from 40 years later, basically, that we can kind of talk about it like when we were in high school and we talked about World War II. Because we had no frame of reference of what that time period was like, but people did things, and the protesting of that war, yeah, there was like counterculture elements to it, and yeah, probably some people were doing it just to have something to do, but at the same time, an entire generation of young men were getting wiped out, for something that ultimately proved to be, a useless exercise.
Right.
It's not like us being in Vietnam really helped in the fight against the commies. So.
Yeah, actually, Korea you could make an argument for. Vietnam, it was pointless because as soon as we left, North took over. So to get on a less serious subject, one of the neatest artistic tricks in this story is that Bruce Wayne Jr. is wearing the Burt Ward Robin costume. Yes.
Look at the mask.
Yeah. Because it goes all the way around.
Uh-huh. It's the television series, and it's such a subtle little thing, but it's great. It does bring up a not an inconsistency. Gotham thinks there's only one Batman, but obviously they know there's more than one Robin.
Right.
Because this guy's blonde.
Yeah. You would think that he would use something,
a
wig, or just whatever that what was it, Nighthawk, the Western hero? He had like a powder that colored his hair, something like that. Oh, and speaking of Burt Ward, if you look on page 30 where they're in the bat boat, Robin is punching one fist in his right fist into his left hand.
Yep,
just like Burt Ward.
Yeah.
I love that TV show.
How can you not? I understand that some people look at it as something that almost ruined Batman, but man, when I was a kid, that was everything to me.
Oh yeah,
I loved that show.
And see, here's the thing: I've gone through the 3 stages of the Batman '66 show. I was
about to bring that up.
You love it as a kid because it's Batman on TV. Then you go through, oh, that's silly, it's not the Batman I know, and then you come back to it later, and it's like, wait a second, he's winking at the camera. This is satire. And
it's fun, and that first season has some really good episodes.
Oh, yeah. Well, a lot of the first season came right from the comics, like the Joker's utility belt.
Mm-hmm.
That was great. And now I can watch it with my daughter, and I'm in stage 3, she's in stage 1 still, and I don't tell her what episode it is if we're watching it, because that way she's sitting there, is Batgirl gonna ride by?
That was me as a kid, man. When I was a little kid, it was the waiting game. Am I going to see Batgirl? Is it going to be I had no idea what seasons were, or that there was 2 years without her and then 1 year's with, and not even noticing that it's not a 2-parter. I just liked seeing Batgirl.
Right. And as I got older, I just like seeing Yvonne Craig in the Batgirl outfit.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, or even better, her appearance on Star Trek. Because that was
green on that, right?
She was an Orion
slave girl.
Well, she wasn't a slave girl. She was a criminal. They were in essentially the Star Trek Arkham Asylum. because it was their Institute for the Criminally Insane. So she was a green Harley Quinn, is the best way I can put it.
That's cool. I think it's kind of interesting if you're looking at little details that Joel's middle name was Perry.
Yes.
You think maybe that it would have been Jonathan or Samuel, but apparently both Clark and Lois respected their second boss enough to name their son after him. That's pretty powerful when you think about it.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you even get to mention that Superman searched the galaxy for a cure for cancer for Perry.
Yeah.
Because he was dying of cancer. I mean, the man smoked cigars constantly. So, but none of them worked on humans, which is why Lois is just given up. She said, no, Superman can't find a cure. I'm not even going to bother. And
the Lois getting her diagnosis was pretty powerful as well.
Yeah, this whole year is just full of shots to the gut, you know?
Mm. Yeah, and everything gets cheerful in 1979.
Well, there is a wedding, and why don't we get to 1979? And that's where we're going to be cutting it off this time. Come back in a few weeks, and we will have part 2 of my discussion with Michael Bailey on Superman, Batman, Generations. See you then. Thank you for listening to the Hammer Podcasts. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send an email to gene@thehammerstrikes.com. If you like what you've heard, please visit the Patreon page, which is located at patreon.com/thehammerstrikes, and consider becoming a sponsor of the show. Please be sure to check out the Hammer Strikes on Facebook, Google+, Twitter, and YouTube. The Hammer Podcast is a proud part of the Two True Freaks Internet Radio Network.